What is going on, YouTube? Carter here with Edge Mindset. Welcome to another rousing episode of Get Inside Edge Mindset. I mean, get inside the mind, edge to the mind. Oh God, this sounds worse every time I say it. Thank you for joining me. We're going to be talking about some stuff, right? That's what we do on the channel. This is another topic video. It's going to be a little rambly. It's going to be a little incoherent, but that's cool, right? We're all friends here. We want to hang out and talk about knives. We're tackling the subject of why the hell are Striders so damn collectible, right? I love my Striders. I love talking about them. I find it very fascinating. I love the knives. I love the history, but I also find it fascinating with people that like them and are into them and people that just don't get it. More so the people that just don't get it. So Strider knives are highly collectible, right? That is part of the draw for me because that is part of the knife hobby for me. Yes, I like to cut things. Yes, I like to have a pocket knife. But I also like to collect shit, and I like to share that same thing with other people that collect the same stuff. I like it. I like the grail hunting. I like having those pieces that you're like, oh man, am I ever going to find that? And then you find it, and it's exciting and fun, and then you buy, sell, and trade it, and then you regret that you did it. That's all part of the fun for me. And Strider knives, part of the reason I feel that they are still so relevant and people are still so passionate about them, a small subset, don't get me wrong, I know these are not mainstream knives here that people are into, but a small subset of people are really into these knives. And I think part of it is that they are so collectible, but they are truly collectible. And I'll explain what I mean by that here in a minute, because you have fake collectibles and then you have real collectibles. And for example, Action Comics #1, first Superman, right? Comic book realm, truly collectible. 1990s wild earworm number 43 with the super shiny variant cover. Not collectible, but trying to be a fake collectible. And we got the same type thing going on with Strider knives here. But this is a two-purpose video. I also wanted just to show off some Striders that I haven't featured on the channel really, because, they're just another Strider, but they're still kind of interesting. So I was going to say, what do I want to do first? But here's what I'll do. I'll do a knife overview, and then I'll yap for a bit, and then I'll show another one if I remember. So this is an SMF, right? Obviously, you got the 4 screws here. Insanely minty condition on here. So we have brown G10 Lego, Cerakote dark gray Cerakote on the frame and the blade, and nice micro melt PD1. I don't know if you can. It's hard to see with the Cerakote over the top of it. Maybe you can make it out. PD1 right there. Very good tool steel, very nice, very nice stuff, very nice stuff. And it has a bit of a history with like Striders, right? PT1, very popular knife, steel, and Strider. So it's always cool to get a Strider in PT1. And this thing is like time capsule. Like this thing is probably 10 years old and it looks like it just shipped from Blade HQ or Knife Art or whatever. Really cool to find these pieces. And this is going to play into kind of this overall subject that I'm talking about here. So to contrast this one, we have this one. So to prove my point, up at the top here, this is a true collectible. Like this is a pure collectible. This is somewhat of a manufactured collectible, right? So this is a newer version. It's a triple collaboration between Starling Gear, Strider, and Monkey Edge. Very, very cool. Awesome digi laser on the blade there. And then cool digi lasering on the frame with the monkey face right there. And then it came with a Starling Gear super heavy brass bead with the Flying War Penis logo right there on the forehead. So this is trying to be a collectible, right? This is trying to be a super special edition, right? Like super shiny, fancy, blah, blah, blah. And it's still got its collectability, right? Because they didn't make a lot of these and it's kind of a unique piece. Not everybody knows this existed. I didn't know it existed until it popped up for sale. But this one is kind of more of a true collectible. So the reason, let's go back to the comic book thing. So the reason Action Comics #1 is so desirable and worth $1 million, aside, obviously it's because it's the first appearance of Superman, but the other reason is nobody thought it was gonna be collectible. Nobody thought that the blue and red caped guy meant anything. So nobody kept those very few people kept those comics nice. They read them, they threw them away, they used them as kindling in the fire, they lined their bird cages with them. Nobody kept them nice. And so because of that, they're super rare, super, super rare. Now in the 90s, when everybody realized that these comic books could be worth a lot of money, all of a sudden they became manufactured fake collectibles. And so they started doing all these variants, right? Special editions, similar to this knife right here. And everybody kept them nice. And guess what? They're not collectible because they made a ton of them and everybody kept them nice. They're everywhere. They're a dime a dozen. You know, it was a big ruse. And the same thing happens with knives. So Strider knives, when they came out, were known as rough and tumble, hard use military style folders. In fact, their whole claim to fame in the early days were beat the crap out of it, break the blade, test it out, send it in, and we'll fix it for free. And so people went out of their way to beat the snot out of these knives. Nobody ever in a million years thought these things would be collectible or worth anything, and they beat the crap out of them. So because of that reason, there's not that many, relatively speaking, that are in super pristine condition, like this one here, which is a snub-nosed Lego SNG. The snub is super popular. I'm not sure why that one is just so popular, but it is popular. And there's certain things you can see, like not a mark on this, well, maybe one little mark on the pocket clip right there. But that's it. Like this thing is like super pristine, mega amazing condition. And actually I think that mark might wear off. I don't know. Super amazing condition. And you can see on this snub nose here, a lot of these were molested. People would sharpen these and kind of zero grind them out. So getting one with the original edge, it's rare. That's why it's collectible. It's rare. It's not that it's that special or that amazing. It's not like the steel is anything special. I think this one's just S30V. It's the fact that it's in this kind of condition when nobody thought to keep these nice. So only a few people bought these things and threw them in a safe and didn't touch them for 12 years. So they're hard to find, and that's what makes them collectible. And that's part of the reason why Striders are kind of collectible, because nobody ever thought they would be, and they didn't baby them, right? This was all pre-fancy knife era. And so, yeah, it's fun to find these old kind of knives in good condition. This one's odd. So I'm going to talk about this one. This is an interesting one. And this kind of speaks to the point, too, of like pristine condition. So technically speaking, this is a brand new, never used, never carried knife. Original edge. It's never been like used or carried. And yet it's all marked up. And it's marked up in a weird way. And that is because this knife was purchased, you know, maybe carried a couple times, cut some paper, and then it was thrown into like a box with other stuff. And so it kind of got a little bit stonewashed over the 15 years or so since it was made. Probably previous owner, I mean, this is all from the previous owner, right? I didn't buy this new, but he did buy it new. Through various moves, housing moves, and like moving things around, it kind of just got stonewashed with other stuff it was stored with, because it wasn't stored, once again, it wasn't stored as a, a highly collectible, pristine style knife, right? This wasn't treated like a custom knife with zircuti and all these things. It was thrown into a box, and even though it technically isn't used, it's got marks all over it. And so, once again, even a knife that isn't quote-unquote used is still kind of beat up. So finding ones like this, now these aren't quite as old as this one. This one's pretty old, you can tell, because it has a radius lock interface. So these were actually phased out right before I originally got into knives seriously and got into Striders. I owned a few of these radius lock faces back in the day, but they were all made before I kind of got into these sort of knives. So, this is probably 2012-ish, somewhere around there. Hard to say for sure. It's got the tighter flaming. I don't know if you can tell the difference there, but it's got like higher DPI, I guess you could say, with the flaming, but it's not so old that it has swirlies and like the Hinderer stamped lock bar stabilizer. So kind of somewhere in between like old school and not so old school with this Digicam. This also isn't the oldest version of the Digicam. There's a version before this that was much blacker, and this is kind of cool because how they did this is they took a black oxide blade. Trying to see, I don't have a black oxide blade. I've got all these Striders here. None of them have a black oxide blade, but it's that chalky black coating, and you can see it right there. So they take a full black blade and then they laser this pattern over the top of it. So the older version of the Digicam just had less lasering and more black coming through, and then this newer-ish version has more lasering and less black. So it's the same, it's the same type process as what we have going on here, just done differently, right? This one doesn't have the black oxide. It's just full lasering over the whole thing, which kind of gives it an interesting sheen to it. Same with the titanium on the back here. Very, very cool stuff. One of the things I like about Striders is the way they go about their finishes, right? They don't do the obvious, like throw some paint on there to do a camo. They do something different and something interesting. And their processes are all kind of chemical / lasering, right? They don't, well, I say they don't use paint, and then here I've got a Cerakote version. These aren't all that common. They would do various runs of Cerakote, different colors, green, orange, things like that, but they weren't really part of their regular, echelon of knife releases. They would just kind of do these as special versions with the Cerakote, whereas Digicam was something fairly readily available. Like you could go to any store back in the day and pick up a Digicam something, right? It may not be your exact, double gunner grip SMF and Digicam at any time you wanted, but you could go and pick up whatever you want. Another interesting thing with these older Striders is rust is something you got to look out for, because this had a couple touches of rust on some of the black oxide, rubbed right off, but a lot of the times, some of these older ones, especially when they have the tiger striping where it's bead blasted on S30V, on the bead blasted parts, you can get some surface rust, and they don't always show up in the videos. And a lot of the times, a lot of you probably already know this, but you'll see the rust kind of, here is where it likes to hang out, like right underneath here, right? Something about the moisture kind of gets trapped under here, and then the knife just sitting like in the closed position, it loves to grow like right in this spot right here. And you can see quite a bit of rust sometimes on these knives and other knives, and then you take it apart expecting this to be rusted, and it's not, just because of, oil and grease and stuff used. But so yeah, that is why, sorry, I got on the tangent there. That is why, part of the reason why Striders are so collectible, right? One of the big reasons is that people didn't ever think they would be, and so they weren't treated as collectibles, which made them rare in good condition. And they're also collectible because Strider did a lot of collaborations. They did a lot of special editions. They did a lot of small runs. I've been in the Strider game actively for a long time, and I still see new knives that I had no idea was ever made, collaborations I didn't know was made, configurations I didn't know was made, and there's always some interesting backstory behind it. The other thing with Strider too is they're pretty modest with those kind of collaborations. They don't treat them like big deals like other large knife manufacturing companies. They don't like do some big announcement. They kind of just do, they're a very kind of homeboys in the garage type outfit, right? They make friends in the knife industry, strike up a conversation. We should do something together. All right, cool. Let's do that. And they do a run of like 100. They don't necessarily announce it, right? It doesn't come with like a certificate of authenticity of like, this is number 43 of 100 and with a signature on it, right? They just kind of do it. They meet other people, other knife friends, and they just make stuff happen. And so because of that, you see a lot of very interesting things that you can kind of discover all the time in these knives, right? When you think you've seen it all, you find something you haven't seen before. So it keeps it kind of fresh and interesting from a collector standpoint. And there's no shortage of like there's all different layers of grails, right? You've got your kind of surface level grail, which is just kind of what you're into, like what you want to add to the collection. And then you've got like true grails, which are really rare pieces that you may never even come across the owner of, right? You may just know about it from old posts or old photos, and you may have no idea who actually has it in their possession, and you may never even see one, let alone get the opportunity to buy it. So all kind of real grail opportunities in the Strider world. Unlike some other knife companies where like there just isn't, because they make so many of them, like Microtech. There's some old Vero Beach stuff that are pretty graily, but they've always been very business oriented. And if they think they can do a special edition of something and make some money, they're going to make the piss out of that, and they're going to sell it. And then they're going to say they're not going to re-release it, but then they re-release it anyways. And there's no shortage of them. All right, I've rambled on long enough. Comment down below. Do you have any brands? Here's what I want to hear from you. Do you have any brands that you like primarily because of the collectability? If you're a collector, is there anything, regardless, like it could be traditional knives, it could be whatever, old case knives. Is there something that you're into primarily because of the collectability and the collectible nature of the knives as opposed to necessarily the knife itself 100%? All right, guys. Talk to you later. I'm out.